At the Astro Observers for May 2021, the observing reports. And I'm going to go something here a little different. I did this for Galaxy Log because I happened to do with the observing that I did this past month. And goes back 50 years ago when my parents, for my birthday, got me this Edmunds Scientific 6-inch f8 reflector. And previously, a few years earlier, I was using, I got a 60mm refractor. And as I mentioned in the video for Galaxy Log, that, all my observing up to that time was from home in town. And then my parents, for my 13th birthday, bought this for me. And I was reading some literature about observing objects beyond the solar system, like galaxies, of course, star clusters and nebulae and so on, and saying the best is to get away from town and city lights. So at the time, my great uncle had a big estate outside of town. And of course, it was all surrounded by, 50 years ago, that was all farmland on that area. So the skies are pretty dark. So in late spring of '71, my dad took me in a telescope out to my great uncle's. And one of the things I wanted to see with this telescope was the Ring Nebula. And so that was actually the first thing I ever saw as far as deep space clearly, was through this telescope 50 years ago, seeing the Ring Nebula. It was amazing because, as I mentioned also in the video, did I see the Andromeda Galaxy and some other things? But that was in town, and with a 60mm refractor, it really wasn't showing much. So it was really this telescope 50 years ago at a dark site, and seeing the Ring Nebula, and also M106. That was my first real official galaxy to actually see clearly. So that's what this is about. So on May 12th, I had these two scopes out, and the refractors and the Explorer Scientific 4-inch f6.47 refractor, and the 6-inch is a GSO 6-inch f5 reflector. And that's the one I really was kind of like thinking back in time 50 years ago of using that old Edmunds 6-inch and seeing, the same objects that, or a couple of the same objects that I viewed 50 years later with this telescope.
What was that focal length of the Edmunds?
F8.
F8, okay.
Yeah, F8. This is F5. So my first view of the night, because my first real galaxy view that I really called my first real galaxy view, was M106 of 50 years ago through that 6-inch. So my first view of this night in 2021 was M106 through the 6-inch with a 10mm eyepiece, 76 magnification, and it was a great view. It was a tremendous view. In fact, first viewed it with a 20mm, looked great like that, and I thought, oh, the 10mm really bring it out, and it did. It really, this is my near view image of it, and it was just really cool to, like I said, kind of relived 50 years ago. And then I ended the night seeing the Ring Nebula, because that was the one that really sparked seeing the Ring Nebula, 50 years ago through that 6-inch, and it just blew my mind. So I thought it'd be great to end this really nice night here on May 12th with this view using a 6mm eyepiece, so up the power up a little bit, 127 magnification. And it was just a really neat view, and reminded me, because be honest with you, the skies there at HMS would probably be very similar to what my great uncle's place was 50 years ago, outside of town, a couple miles outside of town. So the view would be very similar to what we see here, like that, 50 years later. Also, I had some other galaxies that I viewed that night, and this was actually the dimmest galaxy I viewed this night. This is a neat little galaxy. It's actually a dwarf spiral galaxy. Now, there's some variations of really what is the true distance of this thing. Now I had it as 21 million light years when I did the near view image. Then I saw where there's others say it's 30 million light years, and then even 40 million light years away. The redshift shows it as 21 million light years away. So that's what I put, but it may be a little farther. But it is a neat little spiral. It's actually a dwarf spiral. It's 12th magnitude, fairly high surface brightness. But you can see, even being fairly close by, relative with galaxies, it's still small. I mean, the size is really small. And here's my near view image of it. And this is at 152 magnification. For a 6-inch, I thought it brought out a nice view of it. It lies in a really nice star field.
It looks like you have Alberio up there.
It does. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's a nice double star up there. But this would be a good one for larger telescopes. But the 6-inch really gave a nice view of it. I really enjoyed it. And I mentioned in Galaxy Log about this being the dimmest galaxy I saw this night. But you think about it, for people who can't afford a larger telescope or can't transport a larger telescope, if this is somewhere around 6 or 8 inch or something like that, you can see a lot. You can see a lot of not only, of course, galaxies, but of course star clusters and nebulas and so on. So that was my thinking also when I did this dimmer galaxy, that actually looked pretty neat. And it's something that's kind of unusual. It's called a dwarf spiral. So good one to go for. For the bigger scopes should be great. And I have a planned challenge for upcoming. This is ARP 72 in Serpents, NGC 5996 and 5994, which is this one here. And some interesting detail can be seen supposedly in 15-inch scopes and up. The main galaxy is around 12.7, 12.8 magnitude, fairly high surface brightness, and it's a barred spiral. And I really think the larger scopes in our club should be able to see some details, some spiral. And then, of course, its little companion galaxy here, which is 5994, it's about 14.2 magnitude. Again, all within reach of a 12-inch on up, like that. So it'd be a good challenge to see what kind of detail can be seen in some of the larger scopes. And it's in Serpents, and it's not real low. It's about, I think it's about 17 degrees north. So it's pretty high in the sky. So if you have a pretty good southern view like that, it's pretty dark. I think you can get some really good detail out of this. So then, as I mentioned in the video, and I think we all agree with this, a telescope is an extension of its owner that allows us to peer into the universe and see nature on the grandest scale with wonders that boggle the imagination. And even though this night, this was the largest scope I had out that night. In fact, this dark window, this was the largest scope I had out. I had a lot of fun with it. And it really showed me a lot of great views. But it also brought back memories of 50 years ago, which really turned me on to deep space astronomy. Because, like I said, I actually started a couple years earlier with a 60 millimeter, nice telescope, saw a lot of things, saw the planets, the moon, some double stars. Like I said, I did see Andromeda, the Pleiades, M42, but that was from in town with a small telescope. And a couple years later, getting a 6-inch telescope and taking it under fairly dark skies and seeing those objects that night. And that was it. That was what kickstarted me to be a deep sky astronomer. And never look back. Never look back, guys. So
All right.
that's
Very
it
nice,
for me.
Karl.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. I like when you get into that past and you're getting started in the hobby, because I always think like, God, I was like 40 until I got into it. Like, you know, um, but it's never too late to start.
No, never.
It's never too late to start.
But it is. But it's funny because we think about all of us how much pride we take in our telescopes, no matter what it is. And before we started tonight, and I was telling you about the issue of the new telescope that I gotten. It upset me because here again, it's like I said, it becomes a tool for us to look at things that very few people actually ever see.
Yeah.
You think about it, even with smaller telescopes, but you get into the big telescopes that we have, 20-inch plus, and we are seeing things that very few people, not only living today, have ever seen through an eyepiece. I mean, think of we've probably seen things,
Well,
that 99.9% of the people who ever lived never seen physically through an eyepiece.
That's the biggest thrill of Josh's obscure universe.
There it is.
yeah. Well, I was just going to say, just go back to the very first Starfest flyer.
Yep.
That was the whole thing that we can talk about it after you're done recording. That was the whole point of Starfest, was not to show people something that they can see from their backyard with their binoculars or their small telescopes, which we do like at the French Creek star parties, at regular star parties. It was, let's show people something they're going to say, oh my God, I never even knew, like, what is that thing you're standing in front of? Like, they saw telescopes, they've never even knew what they looked like. Right. A lot of people never even saw a Dobsonian telescope before. They just had images of just like your typical pirate scope refractor or something, and sights that they could never even dream of seeing. I think that's the thrill of Starfest. So anyway.
All right, Rob.
Yeah. Okay. Let me see if I can remember how to do this.
Okay, you're sure.
Okay. Let's see.
While you cue that up, I will say that's one of the fun things about owning a large Dob is you tell people you have a telescope, and then you show them a picture, and they're like, "Oh, that's not what I was expecting."
Right. Right. Can you see my screen?
Yep. Looks good.
Okay. So this is the night of May 12th into the 13th up at Cherry Springs State Park. The seeing and their transparency were very good. It'd been the first time I'd been up there in a few years, so it will not be that long before I'm back up there again. I can guarantee you that. This is one of the pictures I took from up there. It was it was just a beautiful evening.
That's a great shot.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention this, and this is going to sound funny, and this is going to sound like like you're a I don't know, like a dark sky snob or something like that. But guess what was distracting to me while I was observing? And I've never had this happen before.
The Milky Way light.
No, no. I was really, really distracted by the reflective tape on my observing chair. I mean, to the point I had to pick it up and move it. I've never experienced that before. When I was looking through the eyepiece, my chair was to the right, and I kept looking over thinking someone had turned on a flashlight, and I kept jumping over. My eye kept jumping over to see, like, what the. And after a few minutes, I thought, oh my God, it's my observing chair. And at first, I tried to ignore it. I thought, oh, it's just reflective tape on my observing chair. Then I went back in the eyepiece, and darn if that thing wasn't still like I kept pulling my eye from the eyepiece. So I had to physically pick up the chair and put it on the other side of the telescope. So I thought, that's when you're under dark skies.
Yeah, definitely.
And the reflective tape is half shot. It's not even new. So anyway, okay. So before I go into my Cherry Springs observing, I just have, for starters, Karl, I did some lunar observing.
Oh, that's cool.
You wouldn't really call lunar observing. I looked at the moon through my telescope, is probably a better way to describe it. And the funny thing is, the reason I did it was, and I really would like to get into this a little more, because I have to tell you, it was so it was the day before first quarter. So basically the dark window is just officially over. And it was a really nice evening. And at dusk, the moon was sitting right above my house. You know, I mean, it's setting, but it was still high in the sky. And I just thought like, oh yeah, it's just like I mean, it was a cool evening. It was really nice. And I just rolled the 20 out 10 feet, 15 feet, put in a 10 millimeter eyepiece. And all of a sudden that lunar X just jumps out at me. Here's a better view of it there. It was actually really cool to look at. I wasn't up on my alphabet though, so I didn't know there was a lunar V right there at the same time, or I would have checked that out while I was there. So next day before first quarter, but I'll tell you what I had a 10 millimeter in there. It was pretty bright, so I put a polarizing filter on it. I was at 150x. But I have to tell you, the one thing that I really kind of got into and kind of got lost in it for a while is I took my telescope and started scrolling up the terminator, and up here where the terminator meets the rim, you could just see faint little slivers of light coming through those mountains. And at high power, I was even thinking of putting higher power on it and just tooling around right in this area there. It was just really, really pretty. And it was very relaxing to look at. It was just a very aesthetically pleasing view. So, and I thought, well, there's, you can't look at anything else tonight. So why not? So I kind of enjoyed it.
Rob, the X that you saw in the eyepiece, was it as striking as in that picture right there?
Absolutely. It just absolutely jumped out. I mean,
Yeah.
you didn't even have to look at it. If you had anyone who's never looked at the moon before and said, look in this eyepiece and what do you see? Someone would say, hey, look, that looks like an X. Because
Yeah.
it's actually illuminated. You can see it a little better here.
Now, how long does that, do you know the window of time, how long that lasts?
I don't. And that was the other thing is that I don't even know.
Pretty narrow window on it.
I think it is. And I want to look to see what time I observed it compared to when first quarter was. So I know for next month, it's obviously going to be a different. I don't know if you just say one day before first quarter, if you're going to get that X the way that it is. I think there might be a specific time. But what I thought I would do is I would just check it next month, first day before first quarter. And if I see the X, great. And if I don't, then I'll know I have to have a better timing schedule on it to track it down. But I showed it to Jennifer too, and she was just like, "Oh my God!" Like this. She was like,
X marks the spot.
Yeah, this is awesome. Yeah. So anyway,
keep me posted on that one as you hit it, because that's one I've heard about over the years. I've always been fascinated to see it and never have. So
yeah, me too. And then it also motivated me to pull out the refractor and set up my camera and maybe start taking pictures and start on the moon so I can test out my techniques and everything, focusing and exposures and everything before I move on to something else. So anyway, that's that. But yeah, that was kind of fun. But that was after I got back from Cherry Springs. So here's where I wanted to start it for Cherry Springs. So this is, oh, I got thunder rumbling in the background here. So this is the same slide that I showed last month that I observed this galaxy. Karl, we observed this up at Hawk Mountain in April. And it was really beautiful, and I really enjoyed it. And I wanted to see what it looked like up at Cherry Springs. Now, I can't really compare, like, I can't do a really good comparison on it. So I just picked another photo just to kind of show you, like, this is what like, you have to kind of play along with me a little bit and just think like, okay, this is kind of what you're seeing when you're looking up at, locally, Franks or Hawk Mountain. And this is what it looked like up at Cherry Springs. Obviously not with those colors and everything, but that's the difference. I mean, you know, I was stunned by that object up at Hawk Mountain, and then I pulled it in up at Cherry Springs, and it was just exploding in the eyepiece. I mean, it was like somebody put a flashlight behind the screen and turned up the light, you know, a number of degrees. It was very, very detailed. I could see a lot more down into this. I guess this might be upside down actually. Compared, no, it's in the same. Yeah, it's upside down. So I could see a lot more of this area from Cherry Springs than I could here that I was seeing, you know, locally. So it was just it was one of the first objects I looked at, and it got me really excited for the night because I just couldn't believe the difference. So, you know, you've always said, Karl, and, you know, I know it's true. Two things rule: aperture and dark skies. And when you have both, you know, I had a 20-inch aperture, really dark skies, and it really made the difference. And it was my first really good night with my telescope under really dark skies, which, you know, that's why I said I have to get up there again. So anyway, that was just like, that got me rolling for the night.
It
So
was an awakening.
yeah. So then Doc and I went to the box right around the same time, and we were both blown away by it. So this is like, you know, this is an image of the box, obviously, the 4169 group. What's this, Hickson 61, I think? I think that's the number. I've seen this, you know, hundreds of times locally, and you don't see it like this when you're observing it locally. So I did a sketch, and I'm not, you know, I didn't spend a lot of time doing this, but I just kind of sketched in my mind what I remember seeing up at Hawk Mountain last month. And I don't know if you can, I don't know how that shows up, but that's kind of what I see as the local view.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is the view that I had up at Cherry Springs. And if you look back at the photo, it's really amazing that it's pretty close to the photo. And one of the things that was really fascinating was, actually Doc pointed this out to me, and then, you know, I went back to look at it. He kept saying, you can almost see these things practically touching, these two galaxies. And it was true. You could almost see them touching. And here's my perception of viewing them locally, not even close to touching. Here's the image, almost, you know, obviously in the image you're going to get more than you get visually, but my perception locally is this: they're not even close to touching. And this was my perception of viewing it up at Cherry Springs. It floored me when I saw the extension on this galaxy. I thought I had the wrong object in there. I was like, wow, I have never seen that before. So that was another eye-opening. Trying to think where I went after that. This was another one. This is the same image I used last month. I just wanted to see these under darker skies. The only thing I can say is kind of similar to 4449, much, much brighter, much more extension on the galaxies. I had from my notes that this galaxy was showing a lot more extension down towards this star field. And I had viewed this locally too, and I always liked this galaxy pair because of the two edge-ons, and it didn't disappoint. It was really amazing to see the difference. So I won't spend too much time with this, but again, the distinction between locally and under dark skies was really noticeable.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you get under the dark skies with like the edge-ons.
Yeah,
it's like they double in size.
They do. And the other thing, I think I mentioned this to you, Josh, when we spoke. One of the first objects I went to was M82, and I thought my focusing was off, or my collimation was off. Something didn't look right. And then I looked at the star field, and the stars were crystal crisp. You know, they were clear as could be. They were just pinpoints sharp. And then I realized I was just seeing so much more modeling and filaments around the edge of the galaxy that it looked different to me than locally, and it made it look like it was out of focus or something. But it really was. I was just seeing so much more detail in there.
And
then,
with the darker skies too, you can reduce the power.
well, yeah, and we spoke about that.
The light.
Yeah, we spoke about that too, and that was something that really amazed me. I was a lot of these views I was viewing through the 10, which is 150, and the 8, which is 190. And I thought like, oh, I'm gonna have like my 3.5 with a 2.5x Barlow, and I'm gonna be going to like, 7,000 power to like view some 18th magnitude galaxy that's gonna look like a little pinprick of a sliver of light. The medium to medium high power views were so stunning.
Yep.
And you actually, I was grasping, I thought, more detail out of the overall view than I was when I went to higher power, because I could offset the galaxy to the stars and have that contrast be just more visually stimulating. I mean, I still went high power, but I always went back to the medium to high power views and just thought, I don't have to push this. I could push this to get more detail, but I don't have to push this to enjoy this view one bit. I'm just absolutely, totally satisfied with the views I was seeing. And I'll tell you one that we looked at for just, it was crazy. We were actually looking at fall objects at one point. And I was like, this is what happens, especially for me, because I was only up there one night. Your head explodes because you don't know what to do. It's like, should I go look at the fall objects? Should I look at the summer objects? Should I look at the spring galaxies? I wanted to take some photos, but I didn't want to waste time doing it. I didn't want to destroy my night vision do it. But I put 7331 in there with a 10 millimeter. It couldn't have been more than 40 degrees above the horizon. And it just looked absolutely beautiful, and I just thought like, that's that galaxy can sometimes be underrated for, because people always look at the companion galaxies and try to pick out those companions, but just looking at 7331 on its own under dark skies was really really a lot of fun. So this one I did for I didn't do it for Dan Pontone, but he had talked about one of his favorite objects is the Omega Nebula, and it's always been one of my favorite nebulas. And now he told me that he had viewed it through an 8-inch telescope when the first telescope he had was an 8-inch telescope. So I put in my 17 Negler with a Nebustar filter, and I have to tell you, it was one of those views that I didn't think I wanted to move on to another object for a while. I was just glued to this object. The detail in the image that I saw was incredible. And the most noticeable part was all of this nebulosity down here. You could almost make this like circle here and see the gap in between. And and this just stood out just the way it does in this photograph. But this nebulosity down here was almost distorting the view, where you would have to keep reminding yourself that it's the Swan Nebula, because it didn't look like it at times. If you just looked at the brightest part, you could see it, but there was so much more going on in there. So I didn't pump the power. I didn't do, I just kept it at this 90x with the filter on it, and it was in a real jet black dark background. It wasn't even that high yet. Sagittarius was really just rising when we were looking at this. So it was an excellent evening. I had a hard time picking out the objects I wanted to talk about, so I made my honorable mention that I'll just go through real fast. Higgs and 68. I mean, you can see all 5 galaxies from home, but the way that they looked up there, it just looked like a photograph. Carl, it's one of my favorite galaxies, this 4762 in Virgo. You should have seen, I mean, I don't know if I've ever actually seen the dark lane in it, but this was a jet black dark lane in that galaxy, which I'm curious the next time we go out to track that down and see if I see that. But it was really cool. M104 was ridiculous. The halo was so big and bright and almost resolvable. It really did just look like a photograph. I've got a typo in here. I'll correct that, Carl.
That's all right.
The 3190 group, I think I'd mentioned this to you, 3187 was the brightest I've ever seen it. I actually mistook it for 3193 when I first put in the eyepiece. I couldn't figure out what I was seeing. M51, it had that sticky bun look to it. It was incredible. That little edge on in Hercules, that icy galaxy, that was my first time seeing that. And this 4039, is that this? I can't remember if that which arc that is, but it had like it looked just like Vickers' image, and it had like a fetal. It almost looked like a fetal position. It's just two interactor galaxies with the long tail.
Yep.
That was incredible. That was actually I was thinking about writing up about that one. I should have, but that view was stunning. So that's pretty much it. And then the last thing that
I gotta laugh here, Rob. Go back one. So this is how you know you're having a good night.
Go ahead.
Screamingly beautiful. Looked like a Vickers image. Brightest I've ever seen. Easily visible. Sticky bun. You're just kind of losing your mind as it goes on.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, when I was trying to I could have written a whole thing about any one of these objects.
Yep. Anybody that's had the night that we had it, I'll get into mine too, because we shared that same night. But anybody that's had a night like that looks at this line of definition as like, yep, I know exactly how much fun he had.
It's really crazy. It's like really amateurish, but it was it was just screamingly beautiful.
Perfectly describes it. Anybody who spent more than a second at an eyepiece under dark skies knows exactly how much fun you were having. As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. And then the exclamation point to the evening was this bolide, which was the biggest bolide I've ever seen. And it was pretty amazing because I don't know if there were still some astrophotographers still up. I doubt it, because I think astronomical twilight had already set in. And not surprisingly, I'm almost certain Doc and I were the last two men standing on the observing field. So, I had to run to the porta potty, and I was walking back towards Doc. So he was facing me and I was facing him, obviously. And this thing came up from behind me over my head. So Doc saw, I think he would have seen it first. But what I saw was, I just saw the whole ground light up. I mean, the whole ground, the everything. And, knowing where I was, I knew there was nothing behind me except the porta potty. There were no cars or anything like that. And I froze in my tracks just for an instant, thinking what the heck's why is the ground lighting up? Is there a car behind me? What the heck? And then, just a millisecond later, this thing streaks overhead, and you could see blue and green particles, ejecting from it. And we just laughed and said, you just couldn't end an evening any better than having that come through right as you were finished the evening. So that was my night up at Cherry Springs, and I hope to do it more frequently.
That's good. Very good, Rob.
Yeah, thanks. Good stuff. Real good stuff. All right, let me get this pulled up here. All right, how's that look?
That's good.
Yep.
All right, Josh's Obscure Universe. So, Rob, the same night that Rob was up at Cherry Springs, I made a trip up to High Knob Overlook, and for me, it was one of quite possibly the best night I ever had observing. I'm a little hesitant to give it that title. I probably feel that way because it's the most recent best night, but it was really amazing. I got a couple shots here. This is the High Knob Overlook location. I had the telescope set up right in the Overlook parking lot, and this is in the morning, in beautiful belt of Venus that morning, looking out over the mountains, and got a shot the sunrise. You can actually see the shadow of the High Knob Mountain projected out over the other mountains. It's just always neat to just stand there and typically I go up there. I like to get there before sunset because this view here, like over to my right, is due west. So you watch sunset, and then in the morning you get the beautiful opposite effect of the sunrise. And took a shot with the scope in the morning. Just something to remember the night by. I was like, I need to remember this night. So
I like that shot.
That's cool.
yeah, thank you. So the night kicked off with a view of M51, and I had the 17 ethos in the 25-inch f4, and I just casually walk up to the eyepiece. I know the skies are good. It's looking really, really good, and I look in the eyepiece, and it's just like jaw hits the parking lot, like holy mackerel, like that. The view was reminiscent of views I've had of this down in the desert Southwest, and just beautiful detail in the arms, and at low power, that wide field of view is just hanging there in the eyepiece. And Rob, you and I have talked about this. You were the guy that mentioned to me, and it's always struck me, like, you're capturing this galaxy and you're hanging it right in front of you. And
Yeah.
and that's exactly what it was like. It was like I reached up, grabbed M51, and just held it right in front of me, and just a mesmerizing view. And as I'm observing, I'm thinking, like, this is one of the better views I've ever had of this galaxy, and it's a galaxy we've all observed probably hundreds of times. And it was striking that it was like those nights in the desert Southwest, some of the best nights under the best skies I've ever had. And I got to thinking, there's this little IC companion, and it's funny because everybody talks about M51 and the companion. They're obviously talking about the NGC companion, but there's this third galaxy that, on like the better nights with a large optic, you can see. And it's been years since I hunted this galaxy down, and I remembered it was fairly challenging, and everything had to be just so. And I typically would have a star chart with me with it labeled and specifically look for it. And I knew it was off the spiral arm that connected to the NGC companion, and I knew that it formed a diamond-shaped pattern with a triangle of stars. And if you see this galaxy right here, IC 4278, it forms a diamond-shaped pattern if you include it in this triangle asterism of stars. So I thought, I think I can remember enough of this. I'll just give it a whirl. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. So I just soaked up the view of M51 and the 17 ethos a little bit more. And it was funny because I could tell it was going to be a good night. So I set a timer on my phone to go off every 20 minutes because I tend to like just work a field of view to death, just see how dim I can go. And I wanted to keep moving and, knock off some objects through the Interstellarium catalog. And I was like, I can't spend all night on one object. So I set this timer, and my goal was to observe 5 objects every 20 minutes. And I'm sitting here just mesmerized by the view of 51 and the 17 ethos. I just keep looking and looking and looking and looking. I hear the timer go off, and I'm like, well, that's one object in the 17 ethos. It's time to move on. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go for this companion real quick. So I threw the 10 ethos in, and I was already kind of frustrated now because I spent 20 minutes just, soaking up this beautiful view. And I threw the 10 ethos in. I'm like, I'll just see if I can figure out this star pattern. And then I was like, wait a minute. I don't even have to have a star chart. I see 4278 is just like right there with the other two of them, just as obvious as could be.
Oh my gosh.
And it was so neat to just hit all three galaxies, just boom, boom, boom. And to see this beautiful, huge, grand design spiral with its NGC companion and all the activity with that. But then you look way out, 230 million light years out, and here's like a whole nother galaxy. And it's just like, I don't know. For me, it kind of goes back to what Karl was saying about, I think it was Karl at the beginning of this was talking about, you know, what people haven't seen the stuff we've seen. And I think, like, how many times has this object been observed by astronomers visually? And probably many, many, many times this little third companion is totally missed. And it was just a neat, beautiful view and a fun thing to just randomly capture, considering how much time I've spent in the past trying to hunt it down. And
have you ever seen it locally?
No, not. And now that's not to say that it can't be done locally, but I've never hunted for it locally in years, because I did early on and just found it a frustrating endeavor that was a maybe. And that was the beautiful thing about the observation the other night. There was no maybe about it. It complemented the beauty of the overall view. Like it was like you were working to see it. It added a neat effect all its own. So that was a fun way to start out the evening. Then another view that I enjoyed was NGC 5473. Now, again, you got the bright 101 within 1 degree of this galaxy. And believe it or not, as good as the night was, I never made it to M101. And I regret not doing it, but it was just one of those nights you hated to see end, and it was over in a blink of an eye, it seemed, because it was just so good. And I was just hitting some of this stuff around it, thinking I'm eventually going to get to it, and I just kept getting distracted, and by the time I got there, it was too late. NGC 5473, bright, pretty galaxy in and of itself, but what was neat was to pick off two companions right next to it. PGC 2485420 and PGC 214207. And the two galaxies, the two companions, point right to this main galaxy. And you have these stars right here in a row that kind of give a frame of reference. So there was like a certain aesthetic pleasing pattern in the eyepiece to these two crisscrossing lines with the stars and the galaxies. And I was just looking for NGC 5473, looking to, officially observe it and cross it off in the Interstellarium catalog that I use. And I just saw these two companions, and they were actually very obvious. I didn't have a star chart to tell me they were supposed to be there. I wasn't out to get them. I was just observing 5473, and boom, here's these two pretty little companion galaxies next to it. So, of course, me living in Josh's obscure universe, I've just got to know what these are. So I didn't want to take the time to look it up right then and there. So I made a sketch of this field of view because I had the reference stars. I had the nice pattern with the two companions to the main NGC. I had these other two bright stars, pointing at the main galaxy. So I thought if I sketch this, I'll be able to have a real good idea of, what I'm looking at, and I can go home and research it. So come to find out, 16.61 magnitude, 16.73 magnitude. Now remember, I just saw these. I wasn't looking for them. It wasn't super high power. It was the 7 Pentax eyepiece, and boom, they're right there. 10 ethos framed them out a little bit better. And then I look at the light years, and they're 1 billion light years out each. So I'm assuming they're somewhat of a pair, potentially, if they're the same light years away.
I would say
and
so.
It was just neat to be looking at
It's a
billion-year-old
That's
light.
the furthest galaxy have you ever seen?
No. Well, galaxy maybe. I possibly.
mean, not counting quasar.
I don't know. Not counting quasars. They could be. To be honest with you, Rob, I haven't. All those super faint fuzzy
I gotta
companions.
read up about these guys.
cataloged them.
I didn't know you could. Doc was mentioning these up at Cherry Springs, and he was telling me they were a billion light years. And I said, "Oh, you mean a quasar?" And he goes, "No. These aren't quasars. These are
They look like
regular
ellipticals.
galaxies."
Yeah, they look like a pair of
Yeah.
ellipticals.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now Doc was talking about these.
Well, I don't know for a fact, but he was talking about galaxies that were a billion light years away,
Okay,
and they weren't
yeah.
quasars.
Yep.
So,
Yep. I got you.
well, Josh, you've already given me 2 objects for my next trip up to Cherry Springs.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Thanks for making my observing list for me.
Yeah. And see, I think this view could be neat in the 20 because you could probably frame it out even more. Like I said, that just something aesthetically pleasing about it. But the real excitement was, coming home. Like, it's one thing if you set out to look for something and you find it. It's another when you just randomly stumble across it. And then you realize, like, wow, that was, closing on 17th magnitude over 16th magnitude, and holy mackerel, that was a billion light years each. So add up your light years traveled.
Right.
Just the 2 companions, you're at 2 billion for the night. So you made it pretty far.
Yeah. I probably couldn't see those anyway. That's probably a stretch from my telescope, or my eyes anyway.
Yeah, but under Cherry Springs skies, you could probably pick up the 16.6 one.
Yeah. This is, I think I was mentioning this to you or to Karl. This is a perfect example of where I would pull it up on my telescope and have someone else tell me if they see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if they see it, then I know what my telescope capability is. Whether I can see it or not is just a function of my eyesight.
Yep. And I feel like a billion light years out, the magnitude's fairly bright on these.
It is.
They're fairly bright for a billion light years away. And I was just so stoked when I realized I just was able to just pull them in so casually and just enjoy the beauty of them.
Yeah, that's why I was saying that they're no doubt ellipticals and like that. And I think their surface brightness is probably pretty high. So it probably would look more like with high power with a smaller scope, because yours is 25, Josh, and yours is 20. To go for it, Rob, high power, they would probably look like slightly fuzzy 17th magnitude stars.
Mm-hmm.
So 17th magnitude stars you should be able to pick up.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
and having even having this image helps.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
5473 is fairly large. Those galaxies were obviously galaxies. Like, they had some mass to them. They weren't necessarily
Stellar.
So they were good.
Just a little bit more information about the at least one of these galaxies that Josh was looking at with his 25-inch Dobsonian. The PGC 214207 seems to be a double system. When I zoomed in on it from Sky Survey, you can actually see the 2 nuclei. So it's actually a double system. So now we have a real challenge for Josh, and actually my scope, the 22, and even Rob's, his 20, to see if we can see the double nuclei, as you can see in this photograph as zoomed in on the galaxies. So interesting to find out if this is visible. It would require high magnification. I'm thinking over 500 in any of these big scopes. So be an interesting challenge.
Talking about billion light year galaxies. So Jimmy Lowry, actually, I carry his list with my observing log. Distant galaxies and NGC IC. Jimmy Lowry with the 48 down in Fort Davis, Texas. He put together a list of NGC and IC galaxies that are actually billion light years or greater away.
Oh, well.
So they exist even within the NGC and IC catalog. So as far as, so that was the two highlight views of, going obscure, going dark. But what made this night just over the top was just the overall experience. So the views were fantastic, just fantastic, just one after another, just coming to me all night long.
Stunningly beautiful.
Yes, stunningly beautiful, like a Vickers catalog, like sticky bun. Like, just throw random words out there because you can't even think straight. They're that great. It was sad that I was there by myself because it would have been awesome to share it with somebody. But in a way, I'm kind of glad that I was, because it was like my own special night. And I did have communications with the different guys at different dark sites via text,
Right.
to kind of share in the joy. So I get done with this just spectacular night of observing, and I know I'm closing in on first light, and I got to think about how I want to end the evening. So I'm just thinking, I want to stop and just absorb the night versus, chasing billion year light, which I didn't even know I was doing at the time. And I thought, I'm just going to lay down in the parking lot. It's a macadam parking lot. And I said, I'm just going to lay down in the parking lot and just look at the night sky. Just stop and absorb the beauty of the night sky. The Milky Way was coming up. And I just wanted to enjoy it. So I just lay down and I'm just observing around. I've been completely uninterrupted all night, not one vehicle, one person. It's just been a great night. And I'm just soaking up the moment. And I see this bright satellite moving across the northwestern horizon. And I look at him, that's got to be the ISS. That's so bright. That has to be the ISS. Well, then I realize it's just low enough. I can probably hand track it with the 25, because it's impossible to track a satellite on a ladder. So I jump up, I leave my relaxing moment behind. Now it's game on. I jump up, grab the scope, kick off the clutches, and track down, grab this satellite, and it's the ISS. And I'm looking at solar panels, and I'm looking at the center living area. I'm looking at arcs and domes and squares, and I'm resolving detail within that ISS where I can see like individual components of, like if I knew what the ISS was made of, I'd be like, well, that's the part that, they put on in, 2000 and that's the Canadian part. And it was just fascinating view.
So what magnitude were you at?
Magnification, I had the 17 ethos in it. And I wish I had a little bit more power on it, but it made it so easy to track it.
Yeah.
And it was fairly low, so I may have started to degrade the view by having more power. So it was probably just the perfect power looking back on it. But it struck me that I just observed sunlight in darkness off a man-made object. And it was like, of all the light that I've chased all night, the planetary nebulas, the galaxies, the globular clusters, like there's my own sunlight just reflecting onto the dark earth. And it's doing so off of a man-made object. And it was just like we're catching the sun off solar panels and then reflecting it off of my mirror, and then I'm seeing it. It was just again like layers of space, even though it's like it was the closest thing I looked at all night. But just a stunning view. So I hand track this, and I'm thrilled. I've always wanted to hand track it with the 25, and I was not disappointed. So then I'm kind of keyed up on satellites. So I pull up, the heavens above, and I realize there's a Starlink satellite train coming over. So I lay back down in the parking lot. I'm like, all right, now back to just enjoying the view. Lay back down in the parking lot. Here comes a real tight Starlink train. Never seen one that tight. Never seen one that long. Just one after another, just marching across the sky, right straight across the zenith. It was really neat coming up out of the west.
Zenith?
Yep, they came like right out of the west and just right straight overhead. So I'm laying there in the parking lot, and I grabbed the binoculars, and I just used the handheld binocular. I think they're 10 by 42. And every 2.5 seconds, a new satellite would enter the field of view. So I watched maybe, I don't know, 6 or 8 of them in the binoculars, and then I just went back to watching naked eye view till they all passed through. So I was like, wow, like if you wanted to plan to observe the ISS, if you wanted to plan to observe a Starlink trail, that would probably be hard to do and have it come together. And here I am in dark skies, like super conditions after an awesome night to just get both of those. I was like, oh man, it just doesn't get any better than this. So then I'm like, all right, what official view do I want to end the evening on? Well, there's Jupiter and Saturn. What the heck? It's going to be getting bright soon. I'll just close out with them. Jupiter was beautiful. Saturn was spectacular. Just outstanding.
I forgot to add them into my list. Yeah.
Yep. It's the view that just captures us all, you know, that starts so many astronomers. So I was just floored by the view of Saturn. Again, soaked it up. And then I was like, all right, time to wrap it up. First light's going to be here if it's not here already. And walk into the trailer, just kind of start putting some things away. And I walk back down the ramp of the trailer to go out to the scope. And all of a sudden, there's like bright headlights coming down across the parking lot. And I think to myself, I made it all night. Like, I made it all night without any headlights, interruptions, people. So I turn around and I look back down toward the southeast where the road comes into the parking lot, and there's no cars coming, but the light's still there. So I'm like, oh, well, this must be off in my like northwest. So I spin around, and that's when I saw the bullseye. It was no car. The whole parking lot's lighting up. And I'm looking at this just flabbergasted, blue and green breaking up, you know, stuff flying off of it. And then I realized the whole mountains are lit up by meteor light. Wow. I'm on an overlook where people come to observe the sunset and the beautiful mountains at sunset. And I'm observing the beautiful mountains by meteor light. And it burns out. And I was like, it can't get any better than this. It was truly spectacular night. Truly spectacular night. So
that's what it's all about.
It was good.
Very good. Yep, it was a special night. And I'm glad you enjoyed it, even though you couldn't get up to Cherry Springs, Josh. That was really neat that you could get that night in up there and that no one came and disrupted you.
Yep. And I was glad, honestly, like I said, like nobody there. It was one of those nights I'm like, nobody's even gonna believe this. Like, they're gonna think I just stayed home and wrote a story. You know? So it was good that you and Doc were at a good dark site to you know, like you said, like, this is my local view. This is my Cherry Springs view. Like, follow me on this. Like, it's not exact, but you get the picture. And truly good night.
Alrighty, guys. Well, it was great. I was hopefully we can pick this up in June and have some really spectacular nights also. And I can get, you know, the big boy out also and see billion light year galaxies like that.
Yep.
So that sounds good.
Fingers crossed.
Yep. All righty. Well, that's it for the Astro Observers.
All righty.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Sounds good. All right.